I was always something of a passion anime watcher, not an otaku, mind you, but I would keep up with the seasonal shows. One anime in particular was called Komi Can't Communicate. Based on a manga series of the same name, the show was about a young man named Tanu Hitohito, an exceptionally average student attending the elite school Eton Private High. There, he met the infamous Komi Shoko, a beautiful girl who has crippling communication disorder that makes her come across aloof. Tano acts as her translator of sorts, assisting her with the goal of making 100 friends. While nothing groundbreaking, I find myself loving the anime for different reasons. The animation, the score, and the characters were all on point. If, for instance, you were to prove me with silhouettes of the main cast, I would be able to recognize nearly all of them. There's everyone's childhood friend, Osana Najima, whose gender is still unknown even in light of the manga's conclusion. Then there's Hikomi Agari, a green-haired girl who, like Komi, has social anxiety and yet believes she is so below Komi, she would rather be her dog. And I need to mention Komi's mother, the, quote, eternally 17-year-old, quote, Shuko. For the most part, while several of the characters are likable with their quirks and entertainment value, there is one member of the cast that is universally despised by the fandom. Her name is Ren Yama. It was not hard to see why, as most of the characters follow a trope common to anime. Yama's main gimmick was being a yandere. For those unfamiliar with the term, a yandere is a character who has an unhealthy obsession for someone, which would often proven to be destructive. In her case, Yama was in love with Komi, viewing her as a grand goddess in much the same way as the rest of the school. She would collect strands of Komi's hair and lick them, and the manga takes this even further when Yama considering slipping sleeping pills into Koma's tea when she came to visit her, but she thankfully does not go there. Her obsession for the black-haired girl will result in Yama kidnapping Tano and keeping him prisoner in her home out of the belief that he was an unsightly blight in Komi's presence. It was an infamous episode, to say the least. With a pair of chopsticks in hand, Yama makes her intentions with Tano very clear, asking him if he'd rather be buried at sea or the mountains. Fortunately, Komi and the others arrive and save Tano, and Yama is begrudgingly made into one of Komi's friends, never facing much repercussions for her crimes, with it being played as a joke. If that was all, I would have considered it the end of things. Except, I remember a different outcome of the episode. A part of me think that it was just a nightmare, or maybe a consequence of the Mandela effect. But it felt so real to me that I have scoured every anime-related website I could think of for proof that I wasn't deluding myself into thinking that it was all just a trick of the mind. I even read through the chapters of the manga. For extreme measure, the only difference being that instead of the chopsticks, Yama wielded a knife and threatened to harm herself with it once her plans fell through. The more and more I searched, the more I felt that it was a self-serving memory, but I couldn't be wrong. After all, I remember it clearly. The episode started normally with Tano cheerily going about his day and providing the viewers with an internalized recap of the events that lead up to this point. All was well and good until Yama takes over the monologue as she goes about the day lustfully, staring at Komi and collecting a strand of her hair and placing it in a Ziploc bag. Like in my memory, Yama forces Najima to introduce her to Komi, all while Tano was bound and gagged in the chair. It clearly was Yama's room due to the fact there were dozens of photos of Komi on the walls, doors, and ceiling. Tadano woke up to the darkness and was easily unnerved by the collage. While reflecting on how he got here, he could hear commotion from outside. If not from the duct tape over his mouth, he would have screamed his lungs out. The door slowly creaked open, with Yama sticking her head through. Like the official episode, she asked Tadano whether he would like to be buried at the sea or the mountains. She threatened the young man into silence and hides him in her closet. Komi, Najima, and Yama arrive, but the two notice the oddness of the yandere girl, but brush it off. Tadano tries to make some noise from within the closet, but Yama immediately shuts it down. She goes to make tea, telling her guests not to open the closet, which led to Najima opening the closet anyway. However, I vividly remember Najima getting up to look inside, but Komi stopped him, likely out of fear on what Yama could do to them should they snoop around her room. Tadano could hear their conversation throughout the hollow door. He was so very close to freedom. He could just about taste it. Unfortunately, his two friends would never know that he was within reach. Yama returns with the tea and shoots daggers at the closet, eyeing it for any sign of movement. Tadano sat there, the urge to cry becoming more prominent. The further he is subjected to sit there and be quiet out of concern for his own life. And yet, he knew deep down that there was no way in hell that girl would let him survive the night. Each second turned to a minute turned to an hour. His heart beat to the rhythm of the ticking clock. Beads of sweat rolled down his skin and soaked into the rope. Yama would prolong her discussions with Najima and Komi for as long as she could, all to torment her captive. About 2 hours later, Yama could be loudly heard ushering Komi and Najima out the door, with Yama making it apparent to the former that she would be seeing her at school tomorrow. Tadano once again desperately tries to shout for them to come back, but his voice was growing hoarse from all the shouting. Gathering his breath, a shiver shot down his spine as he heard a scraping noise, the sound of the metal blade slicing through the rails of her staircase, her intent becoming crystal clear with each step. Tadano shook in his chair as the fight or flight instinct started to go into overdrive. The ropes tightened around his wrists, digging into them, causing a wave of panic to crash on him. He gets met with a brief flash of light when Yama turns the light on. In her hands was the knife. Tadano shook his head fervently, but his struggling lessened. His eyes met with the girl's violet orbs. From the moment I saw you with Komi, I hated you. She watched Tadano squirm with disgust, as if he was an unsightly worm. What do you think Komi deserved better, friends? She tapped the tip of the blade on her finger and waited for her words to sink in. After what felt like an agonizing eternity, she spoke again. With her words, Tadano's fate was sealed. I'll become twice the friend to Komi that you are. The scene went black, with the only sound being Tadano's muffled shrieks. I couldn't believe it, but I assure you this is what I heard with my own ears, and I would swear my life on it. Tadano's screams were laced with anguish and sheer horror. With no visuals, my mind was forced to fill in the blanks, and I could definitely say I did not like what my imagination cooked up. The next day arrived with Najima trying their best to console Komi since her best friend have yet to return. Now Komi, don't worry, I'm sure Tadano will show up. He probably had some stuff to do yesterday. Since Komi couldn't speak much at that time, she was going to write her words down before she could put the pen into paper. However, a scream echoed through the hall, starting her and Najima. Komi, I made it! The students were staring at something, their mouths hanging agape, but no words were coming out. Curious, Komi turned and her pupils shrunk. It was Tadano. However, there was something amiss with him. Every movement he made seemed pained, with his frame shifting and twisting. It's like he could hardly fit into his own skin. I'm so happy to be your friend, Komi. The final scene cuts to the ocean. A contractor bag washed onto the shore, and before it cut to black, I heard some kids coming up to inspect it.